大家好, I'm Nathan Rich, aka 火锅大王. I'm here in Beijing, China, where I'm being bombarded by people backed by US government-sponsored propaganda pieces, standing in support of a foreign illegal cult. And that has prompted me to ask, why do Christian cults insist on breaking Chinese laws? The answer is clear as day. Freedom of religion. It's here in China and has been for a long time. You are allowed to congregate and worship whatever statue or book or idea you want, really. I've been to Islamic mosques and Christian churches and Buddhist temples and you name it here in China. Never an issue. I've worked with Chinese Muslims and Christians, again, without any issue. And yet, today when I looked at the news, I saw many scary-sounding US government-backed messages calling for the release of a Korean pastor and some of his flock who were arrested in Beijing. Their crime? Well, just being a Christian if you lack any critical thinking skills. Most articles make it pretty clear that this is all part of China's big crackdown on Christianity, which is super powerful and totally true, by the way. Damn you, China! Why do you spend so much time and energy cracking down on people who are following your laws and doing nothing wrong? It just doesn't make any sense. It's almost like that's not what's happening. Indeed, that's not what's happening. Many astute viewers may have already tried to look into the church, which had some of its members arrested. They probably found an earlier version of the church in Hong Kong, which was encouraging people to drink hydrogen peroxide, which causes vomiting, diarrhea, and even death. That church was being cracked down on by the British in Hong Kong in 1996. No one seemed to care though, because that would make the British look bad. But today, when we have the opportunity to make the Chinese look bad, suddenly this church is a beacon of Christian inspiration to the world. And suddenly, the propaganda machine starts turning. But wait a second, if people are allowed to be Christian in China, then why can't they promote drinking hydrogen peroxide too? Well, that's only one issue. The real issue is much more obvious. China, very rightfully I might add, does not recognize various cults as religions. That's right, the wackadoo cult I was raised in and later got out of is completely illegal in China. Thank you. That's the right move. So is this group a cult? Well, yes. They have all but declared themselves as such. You see, in China, for your church to be considered practicing a religion, you have to be open and transparent about your teachings, and your various congregations and ceremonies need to be done in state-sanctioned facilities approved by the commies. And while it sounds super scary and restricting to the average Christian out there in the international world, it actually turns out not so much. All you need to do really is register and follow the laws of China, then you'll be fine. This particular group, however, went out of its way to not register as a church. This allows them to circumvent any legal responsibilities, hide donations, hide their teachings, and to promote whatever dangerous activities they want to. By refusing to follow Chinese law and intentionally hiding its actions, the church therefore has forfeited its rights to practice religion. And doing so simultaneously establishes the group as a potential cult. And so, after a decade of renegade lawlessness, the cult activities were shut down in 2018. Some of its business fronts were fined, and the cult itself was banned as an illegal organization. But it didn't work. The cult leader continued to push his message illegally for several years and had several run-ins with the law. Some members were detained in 2021, for example. The cult leader told his flock they were being persecuted and just how grateful he was to them for being arrested. He didn't, for some reason, mention that all of this probably could have just been avoided by actually registering and becoming an approved church rather than intentionally violating the law. They were raided again in 2024 and members were allowed to go free, but it didn't work. They simply proclaimed, "We are grateful that there are such young people who are bearing wonderful testimonies for the Lord in this land." In other words, they were happy that they had been raided. And again, they were just raided and detained a few days ago. It looks like some of them will be facing charges for their rampant illegal activities. So, justice served, I guess. I mean, to be honest, I'm a little disappointed that it took this long. Like, why does it take almost 2 decades for China to crack down on cult leaders when they clearly, repeatedly, and flagrantly break the law? So in that sense, it's a bit disappointing. But either way, finally it looks like the cult is about to get what's coming to it. If you're one of those people out there who speaks out against cults, you're obviously already on my side about this. But there are still people out there who support cults. They, especially it seems, support Western religion-based cults inside of Asia. And maybe you're someone out there who understands the dangers of cults, but doesn't understand why China and the Chinese people despise cults so much. Why is China so allergic to cults, which so easily prosper in places like America, where Scientology, for example, preys on children, financially backs rapists, breaks up families, and promotes literal UFO-based ideologies? If you read the propaganda pieces, they will all tell you the same message again and again. It's those damn communists and their endless fight for power. That's what the Chinese government wants: power. Living here in China, however, you gradually come to understand things a bit differently. You see, the communists already have power. They don't need more. They've been in power here since the 1930s and 40s. They aren't insecure about their governance to any degree like that promoted in the West. They're quite fine because they continue to serve, even at the worst of times, at the very least, the most important function in Chinese history. It's the most consequential change, perhaps in human history, the unification of China. They serve as a unifying force for the thousands of different cultures, provinces, practices, beliefs, histories, and peoples of China. That is the backbone of the Chinese Communist power. History laymen today say that their power comes from economic growth, which they claim, of course, is all secretly from capitalism, while simultaneously decrying China for not being capitalist. They claim the power comes from empty promises, or from legacy, or from any other number of things, but all of those are false. Any student of history can come to this conclusion directly. The power of the Communist Party of China comes first and foremost from their unique ability to hold the people of China together and channel them generally in a positive direction. That is the first place that they get recognition and strength from. So if you come to me with this "they just want power" shtick, then you're revealing your lack of knowledge on the subject. I've spoken with countless communists, some barely and some completely red-eyed adherents. They've shared with me their views, their reasoning, their perspectives, and you know what? Not one of them has ever said to me, not one communist, no matter their stature or prominence, no matter their position or involvement, has ever indicated that they wanted power, or that the communists are seeking power. Never. It's always something along the lines of doing what's best for the country, doing what's best for the Chinese people, doing what's best for their family's future. That's what's in their hearts. So screw off with all this power talk. It's just rubbish. So what then, Nathan? If China isn't just seeking power like some kind of cartoon villain, why on earth would they make religions register? Why would they make religions be transparent about their beliefs? Why would Christian sects or other sects have to be actual religions rather than renegade cults? When the Falun Gong cult was cracked down on, the West portrayed them as a bunch of helpless hippies being beat up and abused by the big bad authority. In reality, of course, they were breaking up families, opposing the only government which has ever unified modern China, stockpiling enormous piles of wealth, while promoting that race mixers would go to hell, and of course, that setting oneself on fire was a good thing to do. These days in the West, the cult has massive far-right propaganda outlets like Epoch Times, China Uncensored, NTD, and more. But that's not it either, no. Maybe you like far-right propaganda. Maybe you like UFO cults. Maybe you enjoy watching otherwise sane Chinese people set themselves on fire to prove some stupid point about their cult. Maybe you like watching thousands of people give their life savings to scammer cult leaders. Perhaps you take personal joy in knowing somewhere out there, someone you believe in is truly fucking over Chinese people. Maybe those reasons aren't good enough for you. You still want the cults to be allowed. Well, I have news for you. These are not all the real reasons that cults are banned in China either. Let's talk about the real reason. Now, this is very hard for people to understand for some reason, so let's get there nice and slow. Imagine, if you will, that you are a human and you live in a country. Your country has a history. Your country is sensitive to some subjects and not as sensitive to others. How did you get there to these places of sensitivity? In Germany today, it's illegal to display Nazi swastikas in most situations. But in Thailand, you can buy swastika stickers on the street with not a single judging glance. In America, you're somewhere in between these sensitivities. You can buy a swastika and in many cases display one, but the fallout will likely be very strong and fast. So how did these countries come to different levels of sensitivities about the exact same thing? They have different histories. The people are different, the cultures are different, but most of all, the histories are different. Thailand didn't really interact with Nazi Germany. They don't really have any Jewish population. There's no chance of any kind of Nazi uprising, as there's really never been any Nazi population in Thailand. The United States did interact with Nazi Germany quite a lot. They can imagine an internal fascist uprising, though not really a Nazi resurgence, as there was never really any truly influential Nazi movement in the US in the first place. But Germany had the most interactions with Nazism, obviously, and has the highest chance of creating a Nazi resurgence, as it itself was the creator of the movement. Kind of makes sense. They are the most sensitive to this type of resurgence. I'm describing to you an ancient concept that people used to be aware of in the olden days. The concept is called context. With context, we can understand things not just from one dimension, but in a more thorough way. It's the same mechanism by which we can understand that a white person wearing blackface is a different kind of thing than a black person wearing whiteface. They are mathematically identical, but only with the magic of context do we see them diverge. We know this context is more accurate because the predictions we make from using it more closely match reality. If we forecast reactions, seeing people donning whiteface versus blackface walking down the streets in a big city, without that context, our predictions will be woefully inaccurate. And that is all we need to understand China's crackdown on cults: context. Imagine again that your country had a long, very specific history with beavers. A couple hundred years ago, millions of beavers invaded your country. They came out of the rivers and dammed your whole country into floods and famine. Imagine 10 million of your countrymen died from beaver-related deaths. Now, today, you have many anti-beaver laws. There are limits on the population size of beaver colonies. Beavers imported from other countries undergo strict inspections. You look out to the world and you see that Denmark does not have nearly any beaver restrictions. Why would they? They don't have the same context as you. If you followed me here, you can understand this much at least. Countries have different histories and thus different contexts from which they view threats. Beavers may look like a bunch of buck-toothed mascots in some countries, but they may have a much darker undertone in your country. It's really that basic of a concept which people have such a hard time understanding. The reason it's so hard to understand for some is that they tend to view the world from within their own context. They believe that their particular level of disdain for Nazism, that their culture's level of beaver trust, just so happens to be the right levels thereof. This is very hard to overcome for many people, but it can be done. In the 1800s, under the Qing dynasty, Christianity alternated from being legal to illegal at various times. Ultimately, Britain forced China to allow it at threat of death by cannon fire or worse. As mainstream Christianity spread throughout China, new bastardized versions popped up. Various local Chinese, inebriated with vanity, declared themselves as special or almost as special as Jesus himself. Thus was born the first Chinese Christian cults. One such cult rose to great prominence and declared war on China itself. A new cult-run state was to supplant the Qing dynasty. It was eventually defeated, long story short, with the help of foreign powers. No one in the West was crying about squashing this particular Christian cult for some reason. How many Chinese people died as a result of this Christian cult being allowed to spread? Care to take a guess? 5,000? Well, that would be horrible, but no. 50,000? No. 500,000? Not even close. The lowest, most conservative estimates are around 20 million Chinese people dead. I've seen estimates which include resultant famines and extended causes as up to 100 million. That's as much as or more than all of World War II in the entire world combined. And it was all completely and only because one single Christian cult being allowed to run rampant in China. That's it. It wasn't from an Axis alliance or from nuclear bombs. It was from one single Christian cult in China. Now, if you didn't know that fact before, that's not China's fault. Well, actually, in a way, it is China's fault if you don't know that, but that's a subject for another video about where I think China's gone wrong with communication. Suffice to say, though, it's your responsibility to understand this little thing called context when you talk about a subject as big as one of the oldest and largest civilizations ever to exist on Earth. So imagine being a Chinese authority or anyone who cares about the future of China. I know, it's probably really hard for some of you to imagine actually caring about China, but try. Just imagine that. What would you do to prevent another 20 or 50 or 100 million people dying miserable deaths fighting another Christian cult? Would you place strict requirements on religions? Would you do everything in your power to ban smaller cults, especially those which defiantly declare that they're not going to abide by your laws? See how simple this becomes when you understand the context of China? No one in the Chinese government gives a crap what you believe in, be it Christianity or whatever. Their job is to ensure, by blood oath to the people of China, that another 100 million won't die for something so pointless, stupid, and most importantly avoidable as a rogue cult rising up again. Remember, this already happened, again, and creating an internal war. This already happened. I know it's natural to feel this kind of, oh, come on, what are the chances of that? It already happened. Get it? So maybe you're in a country that cults are just sucking the life and money out of families and influencing people to poison themselves or set themselves on fire or whatever. Lucky for you. But here in China, cults have already proven themselves to be an enormous threat, not just to the government, but also to the Chinese people. So I say, poor job done to the Chinese communists for allowing this cult to exist as long as they have, but great job on finally cracking down on it. Do not, by any means, allow any cults in China ever. I truly, truly mean that. And if you're one of the cult members, I strongly urge you to go with a real religion, or better yet, start taking actual responsibility for your life by realizing all religions are lies, and the only truth is that all of us are the same and all deserve the same rights and value as each other. We don't need a bearded sky judge to tell us to be good. There may be something supernatural and beautiful out there. But if there is, it definitely wouldn't want us drinking hydrogen peroxide, setting ourselves on fire, flagrantly and publicly violating the laws of the land, starting wars, or creating yet another random rewrite of the Christian Bible. Really think about that. Until next time, I'm Nathan Rich. Thanks everybody. 谢谢.